Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 120, and today we will not have a special guest. I will be the presenter today. I want to focus on a special topic today, which is the Congressional Black Caucus. This is on the continuation of an interview that I conducted. Well, actually, I didn't conduct it. Tracy Carson conducted the interview. I was a guest on her show about a month ago, and I'm going to link that video in the episode description of this special episode 120. And I'm also going to share a clip with you all from that for said interview with Tracy Carson. But before we get started today, I want to say thanks to all my subscribers, all my viewers, all the support that I get in general, even for people who haven't subscribed to the channel yet, but they follow the channel. I do urge people to subscribe to the channel for free. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a little bit of time to expand your mind. And remember, you can't unthink free thought. Today, again, we're going to discuss the Congressional Black Caucus, but not in a traditional sense, because if you go on YouTube and you type in Congressional Black Caucus, you're going to get a lot of small clips, maybe 5-6 minute videos that give a brief history of the caucus. And it's from a particular angle. I want this to be from a more nuanced perspective because there is an assumption that the Congressional Black Caucus is pretty much a Democratic Party formation, which it is. But I want to just show some of the particularities within the formation of this caucus that makes it unique, and to sort of show a historical trajectory to where it presently sits in the scheme of things. Sure, what we're talking about now is very much engulfed in the Democratic Party structure, but it didn't always start out that way, and I want to try to explain that some to people. And I have harsh criticisms of the Congressional Black Caucus. I think it's outlived its purpose, but I do want to highlight the interesting history behind it and just make this informative. I'm not trying to be argumentative with this particular topic, but I think it's noteworthy enough because there has been some interest in it. And like I said before, I was on an interview about a month ago discussing the topic at length. Thanks to all the people again. We just we have so much international support, domestic support, and just tell your friends and family. People ask all the time, "How can I help support you, Kiko?" What I just said: subscribe for free. Tell your friends and family to do the same thing. Share the videos, and also this is culture and politics. It's not just politics. We talk about a lot of cultural issues that have nothing to do with politics. Sometimes they intertwine, but that will be the way I market it. It's culture and politics. Some people don't like the culture content, they follow the political content, and vice versa. They don't like the political stuff that we discuss, so they may just watch the cultural content. And some examples of this cultural content would be the sex work episode that we did with Heather Berg, and her book Sex Porn Work was the name of the book. And we've discussed topics like my Yaya Rising with my dissertation director, Dr. Don Duke. And it talks about the importance of the maypole, the appropriation of the maypole festival celebration, the dance that's used in Nicaragua. And there's just so many different topics that we discuss on here. Ramon Muñiz Sarmiento, a colleague of mine, we talked about Cuba, just the society in Cuba, the embargo, the implications of the embargo. But this last interview that we did with him, we discussed his book that's about literary criticism. It has nothing to do with politics. We have a guest coming up next month that's also a colleague of mine, and we're going to discuss a lot of important topics. Las Almas Negras, Catalina Rojas Blanco, from in Colombia. She's based in Colombia. I think she lives in Massachusetts right now. And then I think my friend Jehar is going to also come on in the month of May to discuss his dissertation that we previously discussed. I believe it's episode 33, something like that. But again, there's a little bit for everyone on this channel. But let's get started with the Congressional Black Caucus. And I just want to say that it did start out as a Democratic Party arm. That's at least what I believe. It says nonpartisan. It started out as a nonpartisan organization within the Democratic Party, but that in itself is problematic. There's no way it's nonpartisan if it's attached to one of the parties automatically. But it was actually called the Democratic Select Committee in 19 up until 1969, and in 71 it officially became named the Congressional Black Caucus. What we know today is the Congressional Black Caucus. There were about 13 people that were a part of that original Congressional Black Caucus in 1971. There were three important people that started out the caucus. So Shirley Chisholm being the first Black woman in Congress. She's pretty much the face of the Congressional Black Caucus, the early stages of it. And he also had two other gentlemen, Bill Clay and Louis Stokes. Those three people, Shirley Chisholm, Louis Stokes, and Bill Clay, those three people were integral to the formation of the Congressional Black Caucus. It was officially formed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was an extension of the Civil Rights Act of 1965 as well. So all during that period, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you basically have a continuation, the implications of that particular act with subsequent acts. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 technically created the Congressional Black Caucus that we know today. That was originally called the Democratic Select Committee. And people are going to ask, what does this have to do with today? I'll sort of get to that. This is more of a historical approach to the situation. The Congressional Black Caucus was, I argue that the original members and the people throughout the 80s, even not, those people from the late 60s all the way through the 80s were pretty much associated with the civil rights movement. And having said that, their politics reflected the civil rights era. And you have to understand, even if we're talking within the Democratic Party context, back then the Democratic Party was a labor party. There wasn't as much lobbyism as it is now. And that's kind of what dissolved the Congressional Black Caucus, in my opinion, as far as when they made the complete shift over into just everything Democratic Party, whatever the leadership said, they abided by it. It wasn't always like that. The earlier members were more outspoken against social issues. As a matter of fact, issues like reparations, for instance, that are very much political football issues now, were actually taken into very strong consideration back then. And they were actually proposed by the Congressional Black Caucus like reparations proposals. One such person being John Conyers, who's a part of the caucus, the CBC. And back in the 70s, he really made policy initiatives to get reparations into the imagination of the U.S. Congress. Now reparations is very much an issue that's used around the 2-year, 4-year election cycles conveniently, when there's never really any kind of headwinds as far as people advocating reparations, not even defining what reparations means to them before it even gets to the legislation area. So reparations now is more or less a decorative issue, in my opinion. Doesn't mean that it's not important to some people. It was very, very important to me at one point, but I've realized now that the reparations issue is never going to occur in its current form because there's simply no political support for it. I think up until June of 2020, a month after the George Floyd murder, I think it was like 12% of white people supported reparations. And so politically, the reparations has no clout in Congress. I mean, that's just the reality. And there's no indication that it has any support. And there's a bill, HR 40 bill, that was proposed by Sheila Jackson Lee in the state of Texas. I think that was proposed in 2019, HR 40. This bill And it's basically just a study into reparations. There's nothing that's in there that's actually saying this is what people should expect from reparations. For it to even go into the floor is just simply a study, like we should study reparations. And I think we need to, if we're serious about an issue like this and if people are actually on board with an issue like reparations, you need to actually give proposals, give stuff in the fine print so people can actually move things forward within the chambers. But again, that's, I don't think, part of the agenda. I think the agenda is just to rope people in each election cycle and to get people to believe that they have something in their best interest when really it's just serving the party's interest. And so this goes back to the Congressional Black Caucus, who traditionally spoke out against issues like the occupation, the Israeli occupation of Palestine. This was very common even back in the 60s and 70s, because you have to understand that the Black Power movement, the Black Liberation movement, and the Palestinian Liberation movement have a correlation, a direct correlation. They always have been linked together uh, in a shape or form. Even going back to the Mandela apartheid era in South Africa, the South African liberation movement, the Mandela liberation movement, was linked to the Palestinian liberation movement. So it will make sense that the Black leaders during this time period would have this kind of global outlook. I would argue that the Congressional Black Caucus, when it first started out, had a more global perspective. It had a more globalist perspective when it came to internationalism, international awareness, very anti-war when it came to the stances against the U.S. empire expanding. The Congressional Black Caucus now is very much in lockstep with the Democratic Party. So whatever the leadership says, that's what the caucus does. And this is a captured audience. The Congressional Black Caucus now is a captured audience. People could argue that it started out that way. It was going to be this way inevitably because it was formed within the confines of the Democratic Party. But the Congressional Black Caucus had shown signs back then, because of its affiliation with the civil rights movement, to go against the Democratic Party itself. And like I said, one example would be being way more outspoken against the Israeli occupation compared to the Democratic Party counterparts, the peers within the party, because you have to understand, even now, a lot of Democrats aren't comfortable speaking out against Israel in particular, because of we know that this is a lobby issue. A lot of this is because the Israeli lobby is very deep in the U.S. Populace and also the political system, Congress. And a lot of these politicians are simply bought out by these lobbies and these corporations. They kind of go hand in hand, the lobbyism, the corporations, the corporatism. And that's why the caucus really changed, honestly, under the Clinton administration in the 1990s. That's when the war machine really started to ratchet up, the Gulf War, and then you also had the war in Iraq that followed that. And it just seemed like there's just a never-ending story. Afghanistan, Iraq. But the turning point was probably during the Bush years. That's when the caucus pretty much shifted over into more of a pro-war stance as a body itself. And a lot of that is because of lobbying. The war lobby is very strong in Congress. And so the Black Caucus is no exception to being influenced by this money in politics. But the apartheid era was very important too for the Congressional Black Caucus. There was a time where the United States was indirectly supporting South African apartheid, and this is exemplified in the War of Angola. If you research the War of Angola, uh, Castro's Cuba was on the other side of that, but we were actually indirectly supporting South African apartheid with just our global ties during that time. And the U.S. does a good job of trying to portray itself as being on the side of freedom, the side of liberty, the side of civil rights. But if you dig into it a little deeper, you realize that we've always, to a certain extent, supported just empire expansion, and in some cases, just human rights abuses. And people can argue that we continue to support human rights abuses. So, for as much as we say about the motto of freedom and supporting people, we also have to look in the mirror sometimes and realize that that's not always a genuine stance, because anytime you support the wars like we do, someone's indirectly and directly affected by this carnage and the environmental destruction, the human destruction, all the money that's being spent outside of the country that could be used for projects within this country itself. There's no diplomacy on the table, just automatically we go to the militaristic angle. And the caucus was really important initially. Like I said, the first 25 years of the caucus were probably, they were probably a very revolutionary group compared to the rest of Congress, especially the Republicans and most of the Democrats, honestly. The Congressional Black Caucus was responsible for the passage of the 1986 Anti-Apartheid Act. I was just talking about South Africa. The Congressional Black Caucus was the main arm behind that legislation proposal that was passed. And I already mentioned the Palestinian rights. That's always been a part of the American popular imagination when we talk about issues, whether you're against the occupation or you're for the occupation. It's always been a part of the discussion within U.S. politics. This is not a new discussion. But the Congressional Black Caucus also, I want to make one final point before we go to the clip that I did with Tracy Carson. Under the Clinton administration, I know you all realize that the passage of the 1994 crime bill occurred, and that's true. Joe Biden authored that crime bill. He started drafting it in 1981. And you can go to congress.gov and you can find all this information there. And a lot of his co-sponsors were Dixiecrats, people like this gentleman, Jack Brooks, I believe is his name. He was out of the state of Texas. Strom Thurmond out of South Carolina, just very conservative people. And again, I don't even want to, back then, I guess you can make more or less an argument that there was more of a difference between the two parties. But now, I mean, I don't see a difference between the two parties because the lobbies buy both of them out, the same lobbies, whether it's environmental, big oil, big pharmaceutical, big war machine, big ammunition, anything that you can think of. Anything tied to the military, anything that's tied to large corporations, the banking industry, they're pretty much bought out on both sides, whether it's the red or the blue side. But the caucus drafted its own crime bill legislation that was less harsh than what the Joe Biden-led 1994 crime bill was, which were the mandatory minimums. That was not part of the language of the original Black Caucus. The 1994 crime bill also included 100,000 police increase. That was not a part of the Congressional Black Caucus alternative crime bill proposal. They ultimately succumbed to the 1994 overall crime bill proposal, but I'm just making the point that the Congressional Black Caucus didn't always side automatically with what the party was wanting. That's the point I'm making here. It's definitely part of the Democratic Party, even though it says nonpartisan. There are no Republicans that are part of the Congressional Black Caucus currently. I believe there's 53 people in the caucus right now, all Democrats. And they have an agenda that's very much, I argue that they're just simply black. It's just like it's modern blackface is what I argue is what it is modern blackface. And that sounds very harsh, but that's just the way I see it. You have a captured audience of Black people that's stuck in the chamber in Congress. They call it the Congressional Black Caucus. And I challenge anyone in the comments or anything to name 5 things that the current CBC has done to advance a Black agenda that actually keeps in mind and has a class consciousness component, not just racial platitudes, but things that actually have racial equity emphasis in them. So I'm talking about class and race dynamics, not just race stuff. Because if you go to Joe Biden's website, the Democratic Party, they love to market these issues to Pacific Islanders, Asians, Black people, Jewish people, Arab people, LGBTQ people, just any audience you can think of, the Democratic Party has something for them. But the question is it actually something substantive? And you all know the answer that I have to that question. And so again, I'm focusing on one side of the team, the blue team, not the red team, because again, the red team is honestly blackballed from being a part of the Congressional Black Caucus. There have been Republicans I think there have been 4 Republicans throughout the course of the Congressional Black Caucus's history that have participated in it. But now it's been a while since a Republican has been a part of the caucus. And that, I think that is problematic, even though I'm against the 2-party system, the 1-party system, whatever it is. It's pretty problematic when you have Black people in Congress that are a part of Congress. They just happen to be Republicans and they're not included in the caucus for political reasons. And this has also happened with the Hispanic caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. It was formed in 1976. I think there's 38 members in that caucus, if I'm not mistaken. And they've had their issues too with the non-inclusion of Republican members. All of the members of the Hispanic caucus are Democrats. So it shows you right there that captured audiences. These people, they serve the party, nothing else. They don't serve Hispanic people. And the thing about Hispanic, you have Black Hispanic, and that's an issue too, because you've had some Hispanic people try to apply to get into the Black Caucus, and they were rejected into the Black Caucus, even though they were Black Hispanic. So you have all this confusion going on too. But let's go to the clip. This is not going to be a long video. This is going to be one of the shorter videos because it wasn't really a part of the plan to do this. But the interview, Tracy's interview, got a lot of good reception, so I thought it would be noteworthy to show this clip. I'm going to share the sound. Let me go back and share the sound here. And hopefully y'all can hear this. I'm just going to play this clip and then react to it. And I may give a couple of book references and then we will close out the conversation for today. Please listen. Thank you.
You don't hear members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Maybe Ilhan Omar, maybe she's probably like the only one that has disagreed with President Biden, especially the Gaza issue. And she's raised other issues where she has disagreed. The rest of them, including my congressman, they pretty much have fallen in line. And I don't know, you said it was the 90s and we know when it took place, but I'm wondering why it took place.
Why? What took place?
Why did they start off radicals, which is where, that's where I would prefer them to be, and now they've just Democratic Party?
Well, I just answered it. It's simply you have to understand that we can't discredit the historicity. The historicity is super important because, again, even though it was established as a Democratic corpus, and they say it was nonpartisan when it was founded, but the evidence shows that it was never nonpartisan, was always attached to the Democratic Party. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, the fact that now there's no members from the Republican Party in the caucus is a testament to that fact. But with proximity to the civil rights movement, a lot of the earlier CBC members were still associated with the civil rights movement. People like Ron Dellums, who Cornel West talks about extensively in his book Race Matters that was published in 1992. And that's the reason why I made comments off air before we came on weeks ago about Cornel West and his ties to the Congressional Black Caucus. And the way I view basically Cornel West as an old version of the caucus. He still has a proximity with the Democratic Party, even though he's technically independent now. But we all know that he has a proximity with the Bernie Sanders crowd, that sort of wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, that's just an indisputable fact. He supported Joe Biden in 2020. But it kind of shows, going back to the original point about the caucus members, it's simply the times changed and money corrupts. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
Money corrupts.
Absolutely.
And so the caucus went more right wing, just like the Democratic Party used to be more of a labor party. Even in the 80s with Michael Dukakis, all those people, the Democratic Party was still very much union, very pro-union. But the Democratic Party is no longer a labor-based party. It's a corporate party. And so inevitably, if you're attached to the party, it doesn't matter what color you are, what agenda you have, you're going to fall in line with your party unless you break away from the party. So that's the reason why the CBC members reflect the way they do now, is because the Democratic Party is a right-wing party now. It's a corporate party, just like the Republican Party is. So, of course, those members within that quote-unquote Democratic Party, which is not a left-wing party at all, that's just part of the propaganda that's used. They're going to fall in line with what the party tells them to do. But like I said, there were moments you have to break it up, I think, between the 70s and the 80s. And in the 90s, you kind of have transitional periods within the Congressional Black Caucus. And after the war of Iraq is pretty much, that spelled the end of the Congressional Black Caucus as far as advocating anything reparations related, Black policy related, to where it's just basically whatever the Democratic Party wants is what the Congressional Black Caucus represents. Okay, so I'm going to stop this here, and we go into a little exchange after that. And I was just trying to let Tracy know, and first of all, shout out to Tracy. Please subscribe to Tracy Carson's channel. I'm going to link her, not only the episode that I did with her there, I did another episode to her previously about Black people leaving the Democratic Party, the two-party system. But we're coming from the Democratic Party angle. But me, I'm a lot more distant. It's a lot more distant for me. It's a lot more recent for her, because she, I think at one point still had issues like leaving the party, even though she has supported third-party people in the past. Myself, I've been more or less disenfranchised, and I've been disassociated with the Democratic Party for a long time, ever since Obama's second term. So I kind of started to lose interest in the Democratic Party back then, once I realized what the agenda was about. And you all kind of saw what I explained there, is that's simply why the Democrats and the Republicans are the same to me. They're both corporate parties, they're both right-wing parties, because they're corporate parties. They don't have any sort of working class agenda. And to me, that's a left-wing agenda is defined. It has to have a working class agenda basis. And it's clear that both parties have corporate ties up the ass. And it's capitalism is the system that we have. That's the system that we operate under. But the corporations are absolutely tied into both parties. And so they're corporate parties. And that's why, regardless of what people think about identity issues or anything like that, The actions are what speak louder than the words to me, and the actions are dictated by the lobby campaigns, and that's pretty much what makes the parties the same. I mean, that's the easiest way to explain it. Regardless of what they're saying, you have to look at where the money's going. Um, in a lot of these cases with the pharmaceutical companies, the Democratic Party recipients are getting more, they're taking in more money than the Republicans. And it may be an issue like gun lobbies, for instance. Republicans may receive more gun lobby money, but Democrats also receive gun lobby money. Um, whether it's an abortion issue, Democrats receive a lot of the religious lobby money. They receive a lot of the anti-abortion money. So people ask, like, how did that happen under Democratic watch? The Roe v. Wade reversal is easy. Just look at Open Secrets and see how anti-abortion lobbies give just as much to the Democrats as they do to Republicans, and it's not as confusing then. I mean, take all this baggage out of your head and just look at the facts for what they are. Money dictates a lot of these policies. Um, whether it's oil companies or anything, if there's an interest there, then that politician is going to follow where that money trail is. It's as simple as that. I mean, it sounds very pessimistic, but that's what's happened to our political system. That's why the common person, the working person, doesn't have a chance, is because um, the politicians are completely bought off and they're indebted to the 1 to 10%. That's what their interest is. They don't have an interest in us. They use us for political capital, but we're not a part of their agenda. And the quicker people realize that, and like I said, if you're going to use the electoral politics game, go outside of the system, go outside of the DR system, go to a different letter. But the D and the R letter is off limits if you have any hope of saving the system. And so support independence, support anyone but a D and an R. That's would be my advice to people if you want to participate in the system. And it's really hard to do that too because the local levels are infiltrated. Um, they set all the rules, even at the local level, state level. And so people feel like they have to support one side or the other. They don't feel like there's another option to support. But that has to change. If that doesn't change, then this is always going to be a problem. And we're really having arguments for no reason because it's the lesser two evil. There is no lesser two evil at that point when it's the same shit happening every single cycle. But that takes a lot of convincing for people. But I do want to plug in some books to deal with the Congressional Black Caucus. If you want to find out more information, Race Matters by Cornel West, which was published in 1992. And that is the Cornel West that's running for president of the United States right now as an independent. He has ties to the Congressional Black Caucus. I argued that in Tracy Carson's interview. The Black Agenda by Glenn Ford, the late Glenn Ford, who co-founded Black Agenda Report with Bruce Dixon, who has also passed away, and Margaret Kimberly, who is still with us. And I've interviewed Margaret Kimberly 3 different times, and I think I'm going to interview her a 4th time coming up in May. And the Black Agenda is a really important book that Glenn posted posthumously, and it's about just so many different things. It talks about the Bush years, the Obama years, the Clinton years, and just how these politicians have shifted in their interests, and that they're just different transitional periods where certain politicians decide to become more corporate. Kind of goes into our discussion with the Congressional Black Caucus. It started out as very much a seed from the civil rights movement into the congressional realm, and over time it's progressively gotten worse. And there's not even a point of talking about the current Congressional Black Caucus because it's simply the Democratic Party through and through. There's nothing to talk about as far as the current Congressional Black Caucus. Hakeem Jeffries is he brings in more money. He takes in more money than just about anybody in Congress. If you look at just open secrets, like I said, go to open secrets, type in your congressperson's name, and you can see who gives what money to them. We may actually do a whole episode on that just so people can see how bought out these politicians are. I think that'd be a good thing to do. Maybe just focus on the lobbying aspect of and why people votes are reflected a certain way. So again, doesn't matter if they're Black people, Jewish people, Arab, LGBTQ. It doesn't matter if you look at their politician's record. That lobby relationship is directly correlated to the way they vote in Congress based on certain issues. It's pretty simple. It's not a surprise why people vote the way they do. It's not a surprise why the so-called squad supported the Iron Dome missile system that's used right now to bombard, Gaza, and it's used in this latest round with Iran. This missile system, the Iron Dome, and just all this militarism in general, all this military money that goes overseas to whether it's Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, just whoever it goes to, there's just so much money dedicated to military spending. Our military budget is larger than the next 10 countries combined, and that includes China. So that tells you how much we spend on military each year, each cycle. It's already baked into the equation. There's another book called The Congressional Black Caucus by, I believe the author's name is Sharice Nelson. Yes, Sharice Janae Nelson, The Congressional Black Caucus. It's more, it gives like a lot of positive, it gives a positive approach to the caucus. Glenn Ford's book is more critical of the caucus. It's more nuanced. It gives you the good and it gives you the positive and the negative. And then there's a book that's a critique of the Congressional Black Caucus that's called Blackwards: How Black Leadership is Returning America to the Days of Separate but Equal by Ron Christie. That's a very interesting book. So I try to use different books, different political angles, some more neutral than others. But just that's kind of how I got my information, research on the Congressional Black Caucus. A lot of the YouTube videos aren't really helpful, but I hope that this small contribution gives you a little bit more clarity as far as the purpose of what the caucus was versus what it is now, which again, the current caucus isn't even worth discussing in my opinion, because it's simply just a Democratic Party arm and does exactly what the leadership tells it to do. But beautiful people, enjoy the rest of your day. And tomorrow we're going to have a great discussion with Zach Hyden, the Mad Redneck, and Jay Carrico. They've both been previous guests on the show. We're going to talk about labor, labor, and labor, and just a lot to discuss. Point blank. Who else do we have coming up this week? We have Jasmine Sherman. They're coming on again to discuss their presidential run this 2024 cycle under the Green Party and Unicorn Party banner. We also have Dr. Shiva, a rescheduled interview with Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva was previously on episode 91. He's coming back on again. We're going to discuss 2 of his books. Really more than that, one's a trilogy. One is a trilogy of his, and one is a book called The System and Revolution from VA Shiva, Dr. Shiva, who is also a presidential candidate running as an independent, running for president of the United States. And we just have a lot of people. We have Iwo Omotosing coming on to discuss his contributing essay in a book. I'm going to promote the book and stuff later on when he comes onto the show. We have a lot of people come. We have Carol Swain coming on. She's the author of The Adversity of Diversity. The Adversity of Diversity. It's a critique of the DEI programs. We have a lot to discuss with that, getting more conservative voices on the show, a Black conservative. And we have a lot of beautiful guests coming on down the road. So stay tuned to the show. tell your friends and family again, if you're looking for something that is informative and not clickbaity, this is the show for you. This is the forum for you. If you're looking for something that's well researched, this is the show for you. If you're looking for something that isn't, again, not as clickbaity, but more informative, something that's actually bridging the gap between people, is not an echo chamber, this is the show for you. We do have entertaining segments, but overall, this is an overwhelmingly informative show and channel. And we have a variety of guests. Again, 44% of the audience is outside of the United States. It's an international um, show. It's a domestic show. All states are represented, and most of the countries are represented in all the continents. So tell your friends and family about us. Share the video content. I don't want any of your money. I do want you to subscribe for free. And if you do want to send money, because people have asked about sending money, I'm a monetized channel in the sense that you can send me money directly to the channel. You can send me a super sticker. Right now, if you want to, you can send a super sticker there. The dollar icon is there at the end of each video, right before the episode description. And again, you can't unthink free thought. Enjoy the rest of your day. And cheers, beautiful people. Talk to you soon.